The envelope was thick, too thick for a simple thank you. When Nathan Carter felt it pressed into his palm, his first instinct was to give it back. Pride rose in his throat like fire, but then he thought about overdue rent, about the flickering kitchen light he still hadn't fixed, about his 6-year-old daughter Sophie asking if they could just look at bicycles in the store window again, and he closed his fingers around it. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of one quiet decision to change a life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Nathan had never imagined his life would narrow down to numbers scribbled on the back of envelopes. Gas bill, grocery budget, school supplies. Since losing his wife 3 years earlier, everything felt like survival math. He worked mornings as a warehouse supervisor in Columbus, Ohio, and evenings delivering groceries across town. He learned how to braid Sophie's hair by watching online tutorials at 2 in the morning. He learned how to cook without burning things. He learned how to cry quietly in the shower so she would never hear. What he hadn't learned was how to accept help. The woman who pressed the envelope into his hand was named Claire Donovan. She lived in one of those restored brick homes near German Village, the kind with polished windows and carefully trimmed rose bushes. Nathan had delivered her groceries several times before. She was always polite, always composed, always tipping just a little more than others. He had assumed she was simply generous. But that evening was different. Rain had poured down so hard that visibility on the road blurred into streaks of gray. When Nathan arrived at her house, soaked through despite his jacket, Claire was standing outside instead of waiting inside. Her hair clung to her face, and she looked shaken in a way he had never seen before. A large branch had crashed through part of her fence, and her golden retriever had slipped through the gap. Nathan could have apologized and left. He was already late for his next delivery. But he saw panic in her eyes, the kind he recognized from nights Sophie had spiked a fever. Without hesitating, he set the grocery bags on the porch and ran into the storm with her. For nearly 40 minutes, they searched the slick streets. Cars splashed past. Thunder cracked overhead. Finally, Nathan spotted the trembling dog wedged behind a neighbor's shed. He crawled through mud to reach her, speaking softly until she stopped shaking. When he carried the soaked animal back, Claire covered her mouth, tears blending with rain. She tried to offer him money then, but he refused. He told her anyone would have done the same, but they both knew that wasn't true. The next evening, when he delivered the replacement groceries she insisted on ordering, she handed him the envelope. He didn't open it until he got back into his car. Inside was more cash than he earned in 2 weeks of deliveries. His chest tightened. It felt less like gratitude and more like charity. And charity scraped at the fragile dignity he held together with duct tape and exhaustion. He almost marched back to her door, but his phone buzzed. A notification from his landlord reminded him that he was already 5 days late. Another message from Sophie's school mentioned the upcoming field trip he hadn't paid for yet. His grip on the steering wheel loosened. Sometimes pride feeds the soul, but it doesn't keep the lights on. So he kept the envelope. Over the next week, something unexpected happened. Claire began requesting him specifically for deliveries. At first, he thought it was coincidence. Then one afternoon, she asked if he would consider doing a small repair job. The broken fence still hadn't been fixed, and she didn't trust the contractor who had overcharged her the previous year. Nathan had grown up learning carpentry from his father in rural Kentucky. He hadn't touched serious tools in years, but his hands remembered. He agreed, quoting a modest price. When he arrived that Saturday, Claire handed him coffee and stepped aside. Her house, he realized, was too quiet. No family photos covered the walls. No clutter. No background television noise. Just silence thick enough to echo. As he worked, he noticed her watching from the kitchen window, not in suspicion, but in contemplation. By sunset, the fence stood straight and sturdy again. Claire inspected it carefully, then handed him another payment, far more than agreed. This time, he shook his head firmly, but she stepped closer and lowered her voice. She told him she wasn't paying him for the wood and nails. She was paying him because she trusted him. Because in the middle of a storm, when she had felt completely alone, he had run beside her without asking what was in it for him. Nathan drove home unsettled. Trust was a currency he hadn't expected to be offered. Weeks passed. The repair jobs grew. fixing cabinets, repainting a guest room, repairing a loose gutter. Claire insisted on formal invoices, businesslike and documented. It began to look less like charity and more like opportunity. Still, he sensed something unspoken. One afternoon, after he finished installing new shelving in her study, she asked if he could stay for a moment. Her composure seemed thinner than usual, like glass stretched too tight. She handed him a final envelope, thicker than the first. Nathan felt that old resistance rise again. But this time, before he could protest, Claire whispered what she really wanted. She didn't want a handyman. She didn't want to be generous. She wanted someone to remind her how to trust people again. 2 years earlier, she had gone through a brutal divorce. The legal battle had stripped her finances, but worse, it had stripped her belief in anyone's sincerity. She had retreated into work, into isolation, into the safety of hiring professionals and keeping emotional distance. When the storm hit and Nathan ran into the rain without hesitation, something cracked open inside her. She told him the money wasn't payment, it was investment. Not in him alone, but in the kind of world she wanted to believe still existed. Nathan sat there, speechless. He had spent so long feeling invisible, reduced to late bills and double shifts, that he forgot he still carried something valuable beyond his labor. Integrity, steadiness, quiet courage. Claire proposed something unexpected. She owned a small property management company, nothing glamorous but stable. Several of her rental units needed consistent maintenance. She wanted to offer him a permanent position overseeing repairs and renovations, regular hours, benefits, predictable income. It felt unreal. He thought of Sophie's drawings taped to their fridge, of the nights he came home too tired to read her a bedtime story, of the shame he swallowed whenever she asked why other kids had things he couldn't provide. He accepted. The transition wasn't instant magic. The first few months were hard, learning paperwork, coordinating schedules, managing tenants who complained about everything from leaky faucets to squeaky doors. But for the first time since his wife passed away, Nathan felt the ground steady beneath his feet. He fixed things during the day and came home before sunset. He helped Sophie with homework without checking delivery apps on his phone. He replaced the flickering kitchen light. He bought her the bicycle, not just to look at but to ride. Claire kept her distance professionally, yet a quiet friendship formed. Sometimes she invited Nathan and Sophie over for dinner. The once silent house filled with laughter and the sound of a child's feet running across hardwood floors. Claire's golden retriever followed Sophie everywhere. Nathan realized that the envelope months ago had not been about money. It had been about courage, the courage to let someone step into your storm. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, something else changed. Claire smiled more. She started hosting small gatherings again. She trusted contractors without suspicion. She trusted herself. One evening, as autumn painted Ohio in shades of amber and gold, Nathan found himself standing in Claire's backyard, watching Sophie teach the dog a new trick. Claire stood beside him, arms folded against the cool air. Neither of them spoke about the future. Neither of them rushed to define what they were becoming. But there was an understanding, quiet and steady. Sometimes what we pay for isn't service, it's connection, it's healing. If this story has touched your heart so far, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that remind us what humanity looks like at its best. And before we reach the end, I have a special request. Comment the word hope below if you believe that even in the middle of life's hardest storms, something beautiful can still begin. Nathan once believed accepting help meant admitting weakness, but he learned that sometimes. The strongest thing a person can do is open their hand and receive, because when Claire paid the single dad, what she really bought was a chance to rebuild trust, to rediscover faith in goodness, and to remind a weary father that he was more than his struggles. Sophie's laughter drifted across the yard as she pedaled her bicycle in wide, fearless circles. Nathan watched her, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, peace. And in that quiet American neighborhood, beneath a sky turning soft with evening light, two lives once fractured by loss began, gently and bravely, to mend.